What is up, everybody? And thank you so much for watching the Scouting Combine. Again, we have a great show today for you. Alfredo Arteaga is going to be joining us soon, and we have Greg Tompsett waiting in the lobby to talk about this Bills-Dolphins matchup. Before we go ahead and talk about this, I want to remind you guys, we have 5 on the Floor daily, 6 Ring Canes weekly, Pulse of Finn Nation, which will happen weekly with Lewis and sometimes Ethan as well. And then we have the Final Yard post game. Before we get into the Scouting Combine today, tomorrow, is probably one of the biggest games in the Dolphins' calendar as they will be playing up against the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo in what will likely be a snow game. Let's go ahead and introduce my good friend from Cover One, Greg Tompsett. Greg, how we doing, my guy?
What's going on, man? Good, good. Things are good. It's fun to get back into this mode, and now the Bills have a couple of division games in a row. They've been able to survive this Patriots and Jets, and now back to the Dolphins, and really the AFC East crown is up for grabs.
The AFC crown is up for grabs. And, I was looking at the Dolphins' record going up against Buffalo in December. In 11 games since 2000, they've won 4 in Buffalo. So they have a 4-7 record in Buffalo in December. Now, 3 of those games, the one in 2002, 2011, and 2016, we had Rico Williams rush for 200 yards in a 7-point loss. We had Reggie Bush rush for 211 yards in a win. And we have Jay Ajayi basically ice us into the playoffs in 2016 under Adam Gase's big year. And we're going up against Josh Allen and the Bills and a color rush snow game. I mean, how exciting is it to have 2 division rivals go up like this with the division up for grabs?
It's pretty cool. It's fun. I grew up, with Kelly versus Marino, and the Dolphins were my big rival growing up. And a lot of people would ask, coming in, I said, I'd love for it to get back to a rivalry coming into that week 3 game. The Bills had won 6 straight. Josh Allen was 7-1 and was kind of a Charles Clay Hail Mary away
Yep.
from literally never losing to the Dolphins. And a lot of the games, I think, the score wasn't quite as indicative of how close the games were. A couple of them looked like blowouts that were actually pretty close games late into the third quarter and into the fourth quarter. But it's fun to have it where this game matters. It's fun to be able to get back to where this is one where the fans are really worked up and excited about what's going on, and that now I have to have this anxiety of worrying about Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill and things like that. So, it's maybe a little easier when I can just be like, don't worry, we're going to smoke them anyways. But now it's a little more fun when the game matters and there's something on the line.
There's definitely something on the line, especially with the Dolphins and the Bills with this crowd. The Dolphins have lost 2 straight. They've lost to the San Francisco 49ers and the Los Angeles Chargers in national TV in prime time as well, while the Bills have won up against Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots and the Mike White sanity with the Jets and went against the Jets in which was a pretty competitive game.
Yep.
Now, you have 2 opposite ends of the spectrum. Of course, the Dolphins are on a losing streak. The Bills are on a winning streak. But the big story of this game everybody's watching is the weather. The weather is probably the biggest story of the game. And I know you're up in Buffalo. So what is the weather like right now? And what's the prediction for game time?
So, I wish I could tell people exactly what's going to happen. This is going to change throughout the day today and tomorrow. Right now, the most recent forecast is that we're going to see temperatures in the mid 20s. It's going to be chilly. There's going to be a wind chill. There's going to be a little bit of wind. I don't think the wind's going to be crazy, maybe 10 to 15 miles an hour, maybe a couple gusts that could play havoc with some deeper balls, some punts, some field goals. I don't think it's going to be a huge factor, but maybe a little bit. What is going to be the questionable part is how much snow are we talking about? So between tonight, it's supposed to start tonight, maybe 7 to 10 p.m. And then all the way through the weekend, we could see some areas that get 14, 16, 18 inches of snow. The area around Orchard Park where the stadium is right now, I've seen projections of 13 to 14 inches over that stretch. Now that is a fair amount of snow. That is enough. You got to plow and keep everything cleaned off. The key is going to be how much is coming down during the game and how much is coming down in the immediate period before the game to impact the field. So Buffalo is obviously prepared for this. They know how to clear fields out. They know how to clear the stadium out. They know how to clear the parking lots and the roads. So it's not going to be like it was, when the game got moved, it was because 77 inches were coming down. And there's
Right.
no community that's prepared to move that much out to let people get to the stadium. You couldn't safely get people to the stadium, and the resources that were needed to get people out of their homes to hospitals couldn't be dedicated to a football game. That wasn't the appropriate thing to do. So that's why that game got moved to Detroit. This game isn't going to be anything close to that. This is going to be a little bit of snow, and we don't know, is it going to be just enough that it kind of makes it pretty and there's a nice aesthetic in the field with the snowflakes falling and it looks kind
We're
of
playing
cool?
football in a winter wonderland.
Yeah, like, is it gonna be a snow globe kind of effect? Or are you talking, some of those games we've seen over the years where you got guys, shoveling the yard lines so you can see where the yard lines are during the game and you can't tell where the first down line is and it's affecting people's footing and their speed on the field. I don't think we're gonna see that. I think it's unlikely that we get like that heavy of an impact, but it is possible. If you get to those lake effect snowstorms where it's 2 to 3 inches an hour, that affects the game. That will affect the game. So we'll watch that band. If where the stadium is, if it ends up just below there, it's probably just a little bit. If we end up in the middle of that, it could affect the game a little bit.
It could have definitely affect the game a little bit. I like to see a little bit of flurries, see how Tua and the offense does in the snow. Usually, in past cold weather games, Tua and the offense and just the Dolphins haven't been the best. So, we're all hoping that, they're able to go ahead and grab a win out of this. Go ahead and introduce Alfredo Arteaga from 3 yards per carry. Looks like Alf's beautiful face isn't on here. I don't think a lot of people want to see it. But
I
Alf,
was
how we
looking
doing, my
forward to see.
guy?
He's a handsome man.
Yeah, I couldn't wear my Prize Picks hat and shill for all the sponsors that we have. It was a mess. I turned on my computer, the camera's out, then the other mic was out, so I had to go get another mic out of the closet. And hopefully you're hearing me all right.
Yeah, the audio is good. The important part's good. We can hear the dulcet tones.
All right, so this is a backup mic, and I'm on not even on a laptop. I'm on a trading station. So there you go.
Making it happen. Making it happen.
All right, Alf. Greg and I were just talking about, the snow, the weather, and all of that, but we have to talk about the Dolphins' offensive woes a little bit. The NFL is known as a copycat league, and, they've lost to the Chargers. They've lost to the 49ers. The 49ers held the Dolphins to 17 points, 7 of which came on a coverage bust on, one of the first offensive plays, and they forced 3 Tua turnovers. And, that result wasn't nearly as surprising as what we saw in Los Angeles the following week. San Francisco's defense has those coverage linebackers that can go deep, that can play cover 8, that can play cover 6. And, the Chargers, on the other hand, they weren't necessarily a good NFL pass defense. They were stuck at the bottom of the NFL in all statistical charts all year, but somehow both defensive units were able to find the key to disrupting Miami's offense, taking away the middle of the field. I know you talked about it in your 3 yards per carry podcast with Simon and CK as well. These have been the only two teams that have been effectively able to take care of the middle of the field and take it away for Tua. What's it going to be like in Buffalo?
Much of the same, because the Dolphins haven't built or transitioned toward the type of offense that can win in Buffalo at this time of the year. Their problems are pretty simple. Against San Francisco, it was almost exclusively Tua Tagovailoa, and I understand that it's odd to say he should have thrown for 500 yards against them, but he should have thrown for 500 yards against them. He just missed open people against San Francisco. Against the Chargers, it was just systemic breakdown from the play calling to the quarterback to the offensive line to the wide receivers. I don't think anybody on the offensive side of the ball could, even Jeff Wilson, who popped a couple of big runs, he actually had the fumble that Tyreek picked up and ran in for a touchdown. So I don't think there was a single offensive player against the Chargers that could say that they did their job. It was pretty much a disaster from the word get. And And it's really it began with the play calling, and then it began with some poor throws from the quarterback. But just when the quarterback was actually kind of accurate on a couple of kind of difficult calls that they were calling against what was 2x4 cover 6, he was actually fitting it in there, and guys were just dropping it. And it's in the game chart, and I charted it. I put it on Twitter. He had 4 drops. He had 5 bad decisions all day. Imagine when you go 10 for 28, you have 4 drops, you have 5 bad decisions, and then you have 6 contested passes. And the 6 contested passes, the Chargers break up all of them because your guys can't hold on to it. So it was just a systemic breakdown from the beginning to the end. But as far as this game, they have not worked up to this game. They have not cycled toward the type of game that could defeat the Bills in Buffalo. They were there at Cleveland, but then they had that cynical and kind of disrespectful outing against the Houston Texans. And I think that completely threw the entire team out of whack, because ever since then, the offense just looks like way too aggressive and kind of one-dimensional. Like everything they do is down the field, especially against the Chargers. Against the Chargers, you can look at it. There's 28 offensive snaps that are pass plays. Of the 28 offensive snaps that are pass plays, 17 of them have a shot element in them. So, like, I don't understand how you call offense and just try to get a shot play in every other throw. Like, that's just poor play calling. It's just is what it is. And as far as the running game, since the Cleveland game, they that Houston game, I think, really threw a wrench into what they wanted to do. They threw it 38 times in the first half. They tried to get a big lead so they could sit all their starters in the second half, and they tried to do it intentionally. And then in the second half, you saw what they looked like when Teron Armstead went down. So, yeah, they're not in the best space right now. They're cycling down, and I think they bottom out on Saturday night.
I think they bottom out on Saturday. And Greg, when we're talking about this Bills defense overall, obviously you have Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano, who are 2 great cover and rush linebackers, and well, they can disrupt the timing over the middle of the field. You have aggressive corners in Kaiir Elam and Tre'Davious White, who both will play Saturday night, who are good in press man and are really, really good cover corners, and they can read the eyes as well. This one play, which really shows the effect what the Chargers did really, really well. I finally have the epic pen now. Finally have the epic pen. I can go ahead and circle. I can go ahead and circle players right here. This film is from Sage Schemes. Really, really good analysis right here. We see Drew Tranquil right here in the slot. And, the Chargers, basically all they did was disrupt the timings and disrupt the breaks. Even though Tua was getting the balls, the wide receivers could not get a sense of comfortability to truly catch those balls right then and there. I'll go ahead and slow-mo play it for you guys right here. You're in a 3-by-1 look. It looks like you motion out now. The strength of the side is obviously on the right side, Alf. If you're a defensive play caller or, a defensive back, you're looking at this. What are you thinking? What are some route concepts that you see from this formation?
Well, it's obviously going to be a switch release, right? Like, why would you bunch that guy and then run a guy in motion into the bunch if you're not going to do a switch release, right? So you got to be the farthest DB out has to call the numbers. We make it kind of easy for them because if you look at that, that's not a tight release. That's just not tight. And the Chargers did something very, very smart here. Like, they're playing off, and it's kind of like man off, and they're facing the wide receivers, so they could even call the numbers as on their back pedal. So this is one of those situations where it's just a bad release by your wide receivers, and your quarterback has to recognize the numbers. The ball is on the left hash, right? And you got split safety look, and you have what looks like one-on-one on the top end, right? So, what are you really getting here? If you have 3 guys on the right side of the formation, you got kind of a robber right there in the middle of the field, and you have a 2-deep look. This is kind of like a split coverage. So sometimes you want to simplify things. If you're on the left hash and that safety on that side is hugging the hash like he is, you have a shot play up top, and I know that I just finished complaining about shot plays, but that's where you got to go with the football.
Yeah, you're trying to create conflict when you have this kind of setup, and when you don't force them to make that quick decision. Here, you're either doing the immediate check down to the motion man coming out of the bottom, almost turning it into like a pseudo bubble screen with the guys out in front of it, or you're taking that single to the top of the screen and just giving your guy a chance to make a play.
Yep.
And it was Alf made a really good point in the pieces that terrified the rest of the league, watching that run of the crazy stats that were being put up, where they were taking advantage of the shot plays that were there, but they weren't forcing them. And I think when you get those results, you start to see that, oh, we need those shot plays. And that was the weird part in these last two games, where he was like forcing them and trying to drive the, I have to get those shot plays. And that, it's okay. You have guys who are crazy athletes. Get the ball in their hands early and let them do a little something with it. Live to fight another day. Take a profit and just move on to the next down. And I'm anticipating that kind of pivot and adjustment coming into this game. But I won't lie, I kind of expected it against the Chargers as well, and they didn't do that. So I'm curious to see, are they going to have that patience and that discipline that if you do have if you do have the bracket over top of the press man, are you going to be willing to take the checkdowns? Are you going to be willing to do the disciplined small movements and not force those shot plays?
And the Chargers, and let me add something to that. The Chargers, they didn't do it there, but they had some people call it split coverage, but I like to call it a mixed coverage.
Two-man coverage, basically. You can call it two-man coverage.
And you can only really you can really only use that when it's a 3-by-1 set, really. Because if you have a balanced look on offense, you really can't run that type of defense. So the Chargers tried to, I guess move into those coverages when we were 3-by-1, and we were 3-by-1 twice against that coverage. One of them was a 60-yard touchdown, and the other one was an incompletion over the middle to Mike Gesicki. Chargers didn't run it again after that.
I think it might have been this one, but on this play, you have the linebacker, Drew Tranquil. He looks like he's about to rush. Then right at post snap, he moves into the deep middle, and the play is just basically dead. I mean, everybody is pretty much covered up. The pass rush gets home, and everybody is covered overall. Let me see.
That's also a common move for the Bills. They'll do that with Milano or Edmonds, mug up in the A gap, make it look like they're coming, and then it's crazy the depth that they'll drop to in some of those stops.
Are you guys able to see that yellow line on the screen?
Nope.
Oh, dang. I got to work this Epic Pen thing out then. So basically, yeah, as you said, with Matt Milano, the same thing they do with Drew Tranquil right here. They're going to mug up in the A-gap. We'll go ahead and see it. And pre-snap, it looks like they're about to rush, right? Yeah, you're in that 3-by-1 look. You have your two-man look as well. Alf, you're like, okay, I have Mike Gesicki all the way wide. I have Jalen Waddle, I have Tyreek Hill, and I have Trent Sherfield. Usually in these types of situations, you have Tyreek Hill motioning out. You get a 2-by-2 look, and you have Hill motioning out. It's either going to be a shot play, a crosser, or a dig. This time it doesn't happen, and it's more so of a 4 verts look, in my opinion. I'll go ahead and roll the film right there. Coverage-wise, Alf, what is the leverage, and what does Tua need to process and see to make the right read or the right throw right here?
Well, it's what they were doing the entire game, right? It's going to be like inside leverage, and sometimes your wide receiver has to adjust, but maybe it wasn't in their rules for that play, right? So sometimes your play call is completely defeated, and you might have to adjust on the fly with your wide receivers. And in this case, this is just an unmitigated mess of a play call against the wrong coverage.
Yeah. And
you pretty much, you don't have anything. And, it would be too cute for me to say, you know what, just take the one-on-one guy, but you don't. You don't really have a one-on-one guy. If you look at the safeties, they're well off the hash when you have the ball on the left hash. The safety on the left side of the defense, look where he's at. He's not even on the hash where he probably should be. because you have 2 wide receivers on that side, right? So he's well off the hash. You don't really have anything as far as a corner route or even an out route, especially the way that cornerback is playing him up top. So this is just a mess of a play call against a perfect coverage. So, like, what do you do here as a quarterback? Nothing. Throw it away or run or try to use your legs to get something out of it. But it's just a bad play call against perfect coverage. And I really like what the Chargers did. If you go right back to the snap, the disposition of a cornerback at the snap can tell you a lot of things. And Tua is going to read that as man. And if you look at it, sometimes it's not man, even though that the cornerback is lined up like if it's going to be man.
Now, Greg, as we move on more so to this Bills defense, we saw some of these play calls, these coverage busts that the Dolphins have, and the Chargers, Brandon Staley, it looks like he borrowed basically some of the same concepts he did when he was, the Rams 2020 defensive coordinator. What's going to be the game plan for Leslie Frazier, Sean McDermott, and Jordan Poyer in the entire secondary to play up against, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill?
So the challenge we're going to have is when you go back to week 3, you had a lot of different setups, different structures of what they were going to be using. We had, I think some of the numbers I've seen thrown around with 40% press man, it's all who's doing the charting when those things come up, but we saw the most play that we had from Kaiir Elam. Tre'Davious White wasn't back yet. We saw, the numbers are really skewed because of the insane time of possession. The Bills had ran more than double the plays the Dolphins did. The Dolphins were efficient and hit
you guys had
shots.
40 plus minutes.
And but when the Dolphins had the ball, they were hitting big shots and being able to move the ball. So it's hard to know, like, okay, so does that mean people will use the raw numbers and say, well, they held them to 21 points and that's pretty effective. Well, they still scored a high percentage of the portion of the time that they had the ball. There wasn't, it was just a really odd game with the, turnover and downs on 4th down, missed field goals, different spots where the Bills sustained drives but couldn't convert. The Dolphins, had big, some shot plays when they were in there. I'm expecting that same idea. In that I think they need to have some pivot off of what they played in the first run, because you have Trey White back. That gives you more options. But we saw last week, it's still a good Trey White, but it's not all pro Trey White. Last week was the first game that he played 100% snaps coming back. Some of those plays where he used to be able to just, stab his foot in the ground and break on the ball coming forward, there's a couple extra steps in there. It's not the same break that he's had previous. And I'm not saying that we won't get that back ever, but maybe that's not till next season. Maybe we don't have that back in this first run coming back from ACL surgery. He's still really smart. He's still great in coverage, but he might not be that all pro level guy. So now you combine that. We had Micah Hyde in that early game. Well, now we have DeMar Hamlin. Micah Hyde is an all-pro level center fielder and takes away all kinds of different things. Go ask Mac Jones from the playoff game last year where he thought he had Nelson Aguilar open for the easy touchdown. We don't have that guy as the eraser that was there before. Jordan Poyer is a stud in the box, but he's not the same center fielder that Micah Hyde was. So right. I'm curious. Micah Hyde gave Leslie Frazier and John Butler, the secondary coach, and Sean McDermott, the flexibility that you can be pretty aggressive with Kaiir Elam. Kaiir Elam's 6'1", long arms, runs a 4.3 40, like super athletic. He's not, super nuanced in his, zone leverage. He's not, perfect in phase all the time, but he's a great athlete. So they had that flexibility that, hey, we can go up there and be super aggressive, chuck the guys at the line, but then have that safety blanket behind them. Well, now you don't have Micah Hyde. Now you have DeMar Hamlin and Jordan Poyer. So I'm curious. We've seen what's worked the last couple of weeks. The Bills did some of that in week 3. That's certainly where the 49ers and Chargers got some of that idea from. I'm expecting They're not going to pivot away from that completely. We're still going to see aggressiveness at the line of scrimmage, more so than the Bills normally play. The Bills are very much a too high shell. They are very much an off coverage. We bet you can't go 12 and 15 play drives. We bet that at some point you're going to mess up, and they're comfortable with the bend but don't break mentality, that eventually we're going to get to your quarterback. You're going to make a mistake. You're going to have a penalty, and we're just going to get the ball back, and we'll dare you to move down the field, and we'll rally and tackle. I'm guessing that they're going to have a mix of that, and that we go less of that than we normally see, more of the press man, a little more aggression at the line of scrimmage, but maybe not as much as we've seen the last 2 weeks, because they have to be anticipating some pivot from McDaniel. McDaniel has to have something he's going to be giving Tyreek Hill, and I don't want Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill and Raheem Mostert or Jeff Wilson, if he plays, in space at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage and just hope that our guys can come up and tackle, especially if the footing isn't clean with this field. That makes me nervous in that if they're going to be able to build some of that up. So we'll see where they go. I anticipate we're going to see more press man and more aggression at the line of scrimmage than we normally see, but I don't know that it's going to be the 40% we saw earlier. I think that they're going to try to dare them to say, hey, are you guys willing to check down? Are you going to run the ball a little bit more? And they're going to dare them to try to have these 12 and 15 play drives.
Right. And, you're talking about just some of the playmakers that the Dolphins have. I mean, the Bills also have playmakers in Matt Milano, Tremaine Edwards, Taron Johnson. And in a way, the Bills have the capability of playing like the San Francisco 49ers, while also utilizing some of the tactics that serve the Chargers well. You guys have enough talent, especially on the front seven, and you have 2 games worth of film of defenses that gave this offensive problems in ways we haven't seen over the last, 12, 13 weeks. They're in the cold weather, chance of snow. This is the ultimate taste. This is the ultimate test of this capable but unproven Miami Dolphins team. Alf, I mean, this will also be a test of McDaniel's ability to adapt, which is one of the keys to a successful head coaching career. And if you were following the 49ers season last year on their way to the NFC Championship game, through the middle parts of the season, their run game wasn't as effective, and McDaniel kind of tinkered a little bit with his formation and his blocking schemes as well, and it allowed Raheem Mostert to have an end of the season that was really, really good, and a 200-yard game in the divisional and championship games as well. So what kind of tweaks is McDaniel actually going to do to either this pass game or this run game, Alf?
I think they're going to have to institute some type of option routes, especially in the middle of the field and especially with their top 2 guys. And sometimes inverting your offense could actually work. And what do I mean by that? It's pretty simple. It's just giving Sherfield's and Cedric Wilson's routes to Waddle and Hill, and giving Waddle and Hill's routes to Wilson and Sherfield. So you invert the offense. It should give you some space underneath, and that should be enough to mitigate some of those coverages. But if you don't build in some option routes with your top guys, and then you have to have good timing. Like your quarterback has to be, in tune with the leverage, and your quarterback's basically going to be reading leverage and the hash. Inside leverage, outside of the hash, you're throwing inside. Outside leverage, inside of the hash, you're throwing outside. You're basically just going away from wherever the leverage is going to be at, and everything's going to be an option route until they get completely out of that. But I think that the best thing that he can do, and I know he's not going to do it because he just doesn't like our tight end, is occupy Matt Milano. I had a conversation with the Rockpaw Report guys, and they were asking me who I thought was the defensive player of the year. And I said, look, well, first of all, the way I look at defensive player of the year is much more differently than everybody else. Everybody else thinks that it's Nick Bosa and Micah Parsons, and it's nobody else, right? Because they got the big numbers, and when you watch a game on TV, they're the ones who are flashing. I tend to look at defensive player of the year as the type of guy that if you're playing against the team, you say, you know what? I don't want that guy on the field. Like if you had to pick, I'm not picking Von Miller to be out, although he's out for this game. I'm not picking him to be out because, I feel like Teron Armstead could probably handle Von Miller's game. And I'm not picking Ed Oliver or Trey White or Poyer or Hyde, but I am picking Matt Milano because when he's not occupied, and it's pretty simple how you occupy him. You occupy him by having an inline tight end and running routes with the inline tight end inside of the hashes. If you occupy Matt Milano, he can't be a free rusher. He can't be roaming the short zone, and he can't be making plays as he's wont to do. Like if you give him nothing to do, he's gonna freelance because Leslie Frazier allows him to freelance when he has
that dude somehow has a magnet in his belly for where the ball is. Man. I don't understand how he can consistently end up where the ball is, but it's crazy.
But what's great about that is that you can occupy him, and the Chiefs consistently occupy him because they have the best tight end in football. The Dolphins don't have the best tight end in football, but they have a tight end that can run and has a big catch radius. If you run routes that will occupy Matt Milano, that'll go a long way to opening up the short zone. And if it opens up the short zone, you can start running all your drags and your crossers and maybe even call a screen now and then. But you must occupy Matt Milano. If he's free to play his best game, then you got issues already.
So look, the Chargers defense ran cover 2, cover 6, and 2-man against 12 Dolphins dropbacks in passing situations, which was second and long and 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4. Tua on those dropbacks was 2 for 10, 21 yards, 2 sacks, first downs. And I expect kind of the similar coverages for Leslie Frazier as he's, I want to say 70%, 75% cover 2, cover 3, and 30%, cover 1 and man coverage. Greg, am I on the precipice of that basically?
Oh, that's the ballpark. That's the ballpark. And the other thing is, Alf, this, our running game has not where we want it to be. On the other hand, for the Bills, number 4 run defense in EPA per rush, number 10 pass defense in EPA per play, top 3 in DVOA per rush, and first in stuffed runs. Can the Miami Dolphins actually get a running game going this week up against the Buffalo Bills, Alf?
Yes, but only in 11 personnel. If they're going to line up in 21 personnel and run those toss plays, they're not going to get anywhere. First of all, the Bills don't get out of nickel, but they do get into different alignment to stop your run. 21 personnel is just simply not going to work against them to run the football. So you got to get in 11 personnel, and yes, you have to put Mike Gesicki in line. And I know that sounds suicidal, but it's not, okay? You can run a lot of things inside of him. You can run away from him. You could, it's going to hold the linebackers enough to give you enough space to release a guard onto Milano or Edmonds, and maybe you can pop a run here or there. That's what they did in week 3, and I think that's something that, if you watch the Vikings game, I think the Vikings game was really, really instructive with the way that the Vikings wanted to attack the Buffalo Bills. And I only watched it, for the first 3 quarters because in the fourth quarter was more desperation time. There was a lot of 2-minute offense in that game. But for the first 3 quarters, they kind of tried to do the same thing. They used a lot of 11 personnel to try to get the Bills in the proper alignment so they can, they could run their what they call speed slant, we call outside zone. Okay. With Dalvin Cook, we tend to run most of it with Mostert, and Wilson gets a lot of the inside zone stuff. But 11 personnel is going to be key. First of all, it's their best set for the Dolphins.
It is.
Even with Mike Gesicki in line, and we know Mike Gesicki can't block. But you line them up in line, and it does things to defenses. And
it forces those decisions because, when you have Durham Smythe playing 50% more snaps than Mike Gesicki, he's obviously a superior blocker, but we're not worried about it. Like I'm fine letting anybody trail with him. When you have Gesicki there, you have to pay attention to it. You have to have a plan in place, even if he's not going to, road grade anybody.
Yeah, and let's face it, against Durham Smythe in line, you guys can line up in your cover 6, and you could bring 5. You can maybe even bring 4, and then even drop a defensive end because Rousseau could probably, run with Durham Smythe in the flat because Durham Smythe is just painfully slow. He has good hands, but he's painfully slow. He's not going to get behind anybody. So
he's a probably above average tight end too. Like he's what you want as a blocking tight end, but he doesn't threaten anybody, and that's
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. We are going to predictions and matchups. Alf, we'll go ahead, start with you. The Dolphins win this game and drop a hot take on what they do up against the Bills.
They don't win this game, but they do cover. I expect them to play better. Okay, they laid an absolute egg against the Chargers. I would say something like 24-17 Bills. Pretty close game throughout. Late Josh Allen touchdown on a design run, which I think is the biggest key in this game. Josh Allen probably runs for 75 yards, and that's the difference in the game. I think it's extremely important that Miami learns the lessons from week 3. They blitzed on 40% of the snaps. Josh Allen, on those blitz snaps, had a passer rating of 135. The other 60%, when they only brought 4 or less, he had a passer rating of I believe, 68 or 69. So it's kind of simple. You have Bradley Chubb, you have Melvin Ingram, you have Jalen Phillips, you have Andrew Van Ginkel. Let those
Christian
guys hunt.
Wilkins.
And Christian Wilkins, who makes everything possible around them. Bring 4. You got to get home with 4. You start blitzing, you're going to have issues. I also have a great fear of John Brown. I think John Brown is going to unlock a lot of things on this Bills offense going forward. Maybe not on Saturday night, but going forward, you know, if he still has his running legs, and I saw him run a deep route against the Jets, if he still has those running legs, he's going to open up a lot of things for Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs underneath. But yeah, I like the Bills 24-17. I do like the Dolphins to play well in this game. Late Josh Allen touchdown on a design run. 24-17 Bills.
Greg.
I think I've waffled a little bit based on whether I think the weather is going to be a factor or not to slow it down, because, you know, last year the Bills had pretty nasty weather in that divisional playoff game against the Patriots, and they scored 60 points between the two teams. So, you know, anytime you show up with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, you know, that's a threat against any team. And I think that the Bills have the kind of defense that can stop that from being an insane explosion. But you're not going to shut down an offense with those kind of weapons. So I do think that the Dolphins put up some points. I think that if we didn't have the cluster injuries in the Dolphins secondary, and now, you know, adding in already without Byron Jones, now you're adding in Eric Rowe, you're adding in, you know, these other pieces that now you're having to lean on players that you're not sure what you're going to get. And that I don't know what the communication is going to be when you add in, you know, having to lean on the guys that they will. I'm curious to see what we see from McKinley in a full-time role, you know, what we pivot to now. I believe it's going to be back to Igbenogany, or, you know, whoever's going to get the snaps there out of the nickel. So I'm curious what that leads to. And I think that now, as Alf brought up, whether it's a sprinkle of John Brown, whether it's a couple snaps out of Cole Beasley, whether it's some of those things the last week or two, we've started to see Josh get back healthy and full, where he has the full array of his throws available to him. I do think the Bills put up some points on this Dolphins defense, and I think that they're going to be able to do that. I think we see a late score somewhere in that range, but I think it's a little higher scoring. I think maybe 31-27, something like that. And I think the Bills are able to hold on in this, because I think that they're going to be able to have some of those frustrating 10, 12, 14 play drives where they just keep moving the ball down the field. And, you know, the Dolphins are going to get them into spots where they think they have a shot. And then Josh Allen runs for 7 on 3rd and 5. And then they get him close. And then Cole Beasley has an option route on 3rd and 4, and they pick up 6, and they just keep matriculating the ball down the field. And then a couple of those, the Dolphins are going to answer back with a shot play, and Tyreek Hill's going to, you know, rip our heart out like we've seen before. But a couple of them, I think they'll get some stops, and I think there'll be just enough stops by the Bills defense to be able to hold on for a win here. But I do expect it to be an entertaining and fun game.
So I have the Dolphins losing this 30-17 based on a couple of statistics right here. The Bills offense is number 4 in EPA per play, whether they pass or run the ball. The Finns, they're right behind the Bills, even after 2 stinker of games. It'll all come down to this Dolphins defense, if they can stop Josh Allen on those checkdowns and if they can minimize the shot plays. The thing is, the Dolphins are the 8th best defense in not allowing big plays, and that accounts for passes over 10 plus yards and runs over 10 plus yards. But the key thing is, Alf and Greg, the Dolphins die death by paper cuts. You've seen it in the San Francisco game. You've seen it in the Chargers game with Justin Herbert throwing to the flats 5, 6, 7 times during each drive. The other thing is the Dolphins offense's time of possession ranks, I believe, 10th worst in the league. Now, yes, you have Jalen Waddle, you have Tyreek Hill, yeah, you have that explosive offense. But if your defense can't get off the field, if your defense is there in that cold, brutal weather, in the snow, with Josh Allen running all the time, with James Cook running, and them, converting past the sticks on those thirds and shorts, it's going to be a very, very long game for this Dolphins. And as Greg said it, I mean, Josh Allen is probably going to make this, a game-ending, a game-ending play where it just breaks the Dolphins' hearts out.
Yeah, I completely agree. Dolphins, the main issue is this: the Dolphins' defense, as presently constituted, and the way Josh Boyer has been transitioning it since they traded for Bradley Chubb, is really built to smash like the Green Bay Packers, because they rush the passer well and they stop conventional runs well. That's not the Bills. That's not what the Bills do. Their quarterback runs on design runs, and that's been a disaster for the Dolphins all year. They can't tackle. And they can't really they don't stop design quarterback runs very well. And they just don't cover it well. They do two things well, and it really, I don't think, matters too much against the Buffalo Bills. And that's it. They rush the passer well, they stop conventional runs well. Yeah. That doesn't matter in this game.
Well, not that the conventional run, you're right, the Bills don't run the ball at all, but the pass rush is the one piece. Like, if you're going to tell a story of how the Dolphins win this game, it's going to be that we walk away that, oh my gosh, I can't believe Jalen Phillips had 2 sacks and Christian Wilkins had 2 sacks and Melvin Ingram had a sack and a strip sack fumble. Like, it's going to be that kind of game where there's 5, 6 sacks, turnovers in the backfield, maybe even a defensive score, or a short field. Obviously, the Dolphins can convert points, anytime with that offense. But that would be the story that I would hear here, is that maybe even similar, where the Bills have a ton of yards and they're, keeping the ball the whole time, but they got into the red zone and then had a strip sack, or that, hey, they flipped the field. Last time, what was it? They got a possession on like the 6-yard line. I think it started was one of them. A couple of things like that, where all of a sudden it really skews what the overall numbers are. That would be the recipe that I think the Dolphins would need, is that defensive line of those 4 studs really take over the game.
Of course. Greg, Alf, thank you guys so much for coming on.
I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Before we go, I wanted to shout out our sponsor for today's show, Prize Picks, Daily Fantasy Simplified. Sign up now to claim your limited time offer on the 5 Reasons Sports Network Twitter page. We are giving out daily props for the Heat, for the Dolphins, general NFL, NBA, and even NHL. Use promo code 5 to receive a $100 deposit for yourself. Again, promo code is 5. Greg, Alf, thank you guys so much for coming on. We'll see what Saturday night looks like.
Absolutely. Hoping for a fun, healthy game.
Yeah, same here. Fins up, baby.